Greece. But about 3,400 years ago, they suddenly and mysteriously disappeared. The stunning discovery drew the attention of scientist and writer Charles Pellegrino.
The city itself is a very fascinating find. When they started finding internal plumbing through the walls of the homes, very advanced technology, advanced use of water, and aqueduct systems, the like of which we did not really see again till about the time of the Roman Empire.
Like many others, Pellegrino began to wonder if Santorini was the site of Plato's Atlantis. There are several similarities. For instance, the island's circular outline is reminiscent of the circular shape Plato describes. And from the small statues of bulls and the frescoes of bull leapers, it's clear that the Minoans, like Plato's Atlanteans, worship the bull. Plato says Atlantis was made up of rocks that were black, white, and red. The same is true of Santorini.
If you pull rocks out of here rather randomly, you'll find the original bedrock limestone, the original bedrock volcanic rock, interestingly just as Plato had described the rocks of Atlantis.
But there's one thing above all else that makes people take the idea more seriously. Santorini and its city were destroyed by a massive volcanic eruption.
We're right now on the very edge of an 8-mile wide blowhole in the earth. All of it going off right in this spot.
The explosion was 90 times bigger than the eruption of Mount St. Helens. As the volcano erupted, it spewed out a massive pyroclastic flow, a terrifying avalanche of hot rocks and scalding gases.
Races across the land, slashing down trees, ripping up buildings, acting more like a fluid than a gas. And it's also very, very hot.
Though incredible that a single volcanic blast could demolish an entire city in minutes, there are many cases where this has happened. This is Saint-Pierre, on the Caribbean island of Martinique. Above the town sits Mount Pelée. The volcano is peaceful now, but on the 8th of May 1902, it blew its top. A superheated cloud of gas and volcanic ash surged down the volcano and tore into the town of Saint-Pierre. The inhabitants stood no chance. 29,000 people were killed. Only 2 survived. In more recent times, pyroclastic flows destroyed Plymouth, the former capital of the volcanic island of Montserrat, when they roared down the slopes of the volcano and buried the town. The ash and debris are so deep that today only the tops of the houses are visible. But the eruption on Santorini was much bigger than this. From the layers of rock and ash laid down in the blast, Charles Pellegrino is able to compile a detailed picture of the events surrounding the eruption.
That creamy layer out there on top of that splinter of land that's left at the rim of the crater is about 200 feet of white pumice, which is marking the eruption as it was building and building and building toward the final explosion, the Great Ahum. This eruption was going on, emptying the magma chamber, creating a weak spot in the earth, and building up toward the top here until finally the thing collapsed, released the pressure, exploded.
After blowing its top, the volcano collapsed, creating a hole the size of Manhattan in the center of the island.
In the immediate aftermath of that explosion, you would have seen the water coming in over these cracks in what was left of the island, and one of these ships would have looked like just a mere twig going over the edge of Niagara Falls, and this would have made Niagara Falls look like a little trickle. almost 4,000 years of history was derailed in an entirely new direction. It was pretty much the end of Minoan civilization, and that's what we're looking at up here. It was the end of their world.
So, could Santorini be the true site of Atlantis? It had a sophisticated culture, and it was certainly obliterated by a lethal cataclysm. But there's just one problem. Plato says that Atlantis was destroyed 9,000 years earlier. The explosion at Santorini happened around 1630 BC, which is only 1,300 years before Plato was writing. It's a major drawback, but it doesn't change Charles Pellegrino's conviction that this may well be the site of Atlantis.
There are scholars who've been arguing for years over whether Plato really meant 9,000 years ago or whether he meant 900 years ago. What Plato says is, he says it's a story based on something real, and you have to give him the right to be able to exaggerate if what he was creating was a kind of fable.
So how does Santorini fare on the Atlantis checklist? On the one hand, it isn't as old as Plato said, and there are no signs that elephants lived here. But the rocks are the color Plato described. It has a circular shape. There was definitely a strong cult of bull worship, and a huge part of the island sank beneath the waves. But is this enough to make it Atlantis? To ancient Greeks like Plato, the legends of the Minoans must have made them sound like a kind of super race, and their dramatic demise would certainly have inspired the poet in him. But some experts believe that too many of the facts about the Minoans have been twisted to fit Plato's story.
How many elements of the story are you allowed to change and still say, well, they're the same story? Well, in some cases we have to change how long ago it happened, where it's located, how large it is. I can make a rat a cat by changing elements of that rat, but that doesn't really make a rat and a cat the equivalent.
The Minoans were an advanced civilization. But was Atlantis one of their cities? Perhaps we shall never know. On this journey around the world, in search of Plato's lost city of Atlantis, a variety of sites on land and under the sea have been explored. On Malta, there once lived a forgotten civilization of temple builders. Their phenomenal feats of engineering predating even those of ancient Egypt. In the Bahamas, mysterious structures have been uncovered. Some people link them to Atlantis, though they are probably natural stones. Deep under the sea, off the coast of Cuba, ghostly images revealed what could be an entire island with buildings intact that has sunk into the ocean depths. And on the island of Santorini, there is evidence of the Minoans, a sophisticated culture living in the same region as Plato, decimated in one of the worst volcanic eruptions in history. In each place, there are fascinating parallels with Plato's description of Atlantis. But none of them fit the story perfectly. Based on the evidence there is, Atlantis must remain a mystery, no more than a myth. But one thing is for certain. In the future, more thrilling archaeological discoveries will be made in the world's oceans. And maybe those discoveries will yield the definitive site. Maybe somewhere out there, waiting to be discovered, is the place that Plato called Atlantis.